All right. To kick this off really quickly, everybody here is an SRE? All of them? Everybody? Is anybody a manager? Yeah, see, that was the guy in the back doing this, sort of an SRE. He remembers roughly what it's like. So one manager, developers? Okay, it really doesn't matter for this thing at all what you are, but it just gives me a good idea who I'm talking to so I can tailor these things a little bit. This is a story I'm going to tell you that I've been sharing for quite a while. You've wandered into something a little bit special today. This is nothing like what you've been listening to so far. I'm not going to send you out of this room in almost tears about burnout and stuff like that. What you're going to get here is a set of tools, and I was chatting with a gentleman here beforehand. He's like, I hope I can get something out of this that I can improve my story up to my management, is basically the summary of what he said. And I said, I guarantee that if you come into this room, when you leave, you're going to be able to tell your stuff better. Not just if you do it like I'm doing right now, but even if you just meet your boss in the elevator, or you're talking to your whatever little boards trying to convince them about something you're doing in your project, you will be able to do it better by the end of this. So we got 30 minutes to figure this out, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little journey together. We're going to talk a little bit about what storytelling is, and that's nothing more than setting a baseline. So we're all on the same page, right? Telling tales, telling stories, what it is, where it came from. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at that there is an actual physiological thing about human beings that we can take advantage of. So I actually did research when I started this role about 15 years ago, coming from development, being a nerd or an engineer. I thought, let's study this up and figure out how they do this. How can I reach you people better, right? Why are you sitting in this room? Why are you wasting your time on what I'm doing? I might as well put a little bit of effort into it. And then I'm going to go into a couple of examples, and luckily most of them are focused on SRE kind of storytelling. But to give you a little bit of an idea how you can apply them, if we have enough time, I don't think we will, but if you buy me a beer at the pub across the road after this, I'll tell you lots of stories where I applied what's going on here. And it's actually saved my ass in some of these stories I had to tell, right? And excuse my French. So what's storytelling? Basically, if you think about this, look at all the stuff you learned in school is straightforward storytelling, but think about how the stuff you learned about in history. So how, if we're in America, we talk about American Indians telling these tales about gods living here and doing this, Vikings telling stories about gods doing this and living there. Most of it had to do with embedding something into you, which often involved fear, so you wouldn't do something stupid like go hug a deer or try to pet a bear, right? In Africa, they told stories and stuff so they wouldn't go mess with snakes or whatever. It's all kinds of storytelling around to kind of get a message across to you, to embed that in your head, and to keep the story going through the history, right? So you can tell the next generation so your whole tribe doesn't get wiped out by playing with the wrong poisonous animals. What is it for us? One of the biggest things that people lose track of when they try to create a message or send something across to their bosses, to their, to a group of people like this, is it's a conversation, right? It's not me standing up here behind this and telling you exactly what I want to tell you, right? You're not reading from a slide. People tend to get up here or get in front of a small group at work and change. You know what I mean? It's just as easy. If I remember back to my early development days, we used to have to compile Java. You have to walk away from the Java machine because it took 20 minutes, right? We go to the coffee machine, we get a coffee, we chat, and we'd solve so many problems. Or you'd tell stories about what happened to you you almost got hit by a car on the bicycle on the way to work. Things like that. That's storytelling. That's sharing experiences. That's convincing people to do things. It's helping you solve problems. This is such an important aspect of this that people kind of lose track of. It's very, very important. The next thing is, how many people here have seen somebody try to do something on a stage and they're not Tom Hanks, they're not, these very famous, whatever your famous actor is or actress. When you see them on a movie title, right, you'll watch that movie no matter what happens, right? Because I love it. I know that person's going to make something really great out of it. But I'm not that person. I'm either a duck or a chicken. That's kind of the message here, right? You're either a duck or a chicken. Be who you are. You have a voice, find it. You are who you are. You're not me, I'm not you. It's really important to stay within the boundaries of what you do. If you tell jokes all the time, put jokes in your story. Your daily life and what you go through is what you are. You're not a comedy skit. You know what I mean? You're not a metaphor that's happening on stage. It doesn't work that way. There might be exceptions. There's always one person. Anybody here do acting classes in school? See, there's always a few. So you all are really good at this maybe. So maybe you could sit down and frame a mind and all of a sudden, boom, you're somebody else and you could do whatever on stage. But it often kind of distracts from the message, which is the key part you're trying to get across. What are we here for, right? I like to tell people that if you sit down, if I gave you one exercise from this talk, I'd say write down a one-line thing of what you took away from what I told you. Because for me, that's valuable. When we get to the end here, did you get the message I'm trying to get across? And you might get 3 different answers back. And you're like, so I need to think about message. Am I doing this correctly? Here's something that almost nobody thinks about. Who knows the guy that gets on an airplane coming to one of these things and is working on his message? Or before the meeting is hacking on slides trying to figure out how to get stuff together to do a presentation to his boss or anything like that. And this is just a very small example, but it's trying to make the impression. Look how many people we got in the room here, maybe 30, 25, I don't know, 40. We're spending a half hour of time, times all that time, times how much you're worth. What's your time worth? Luckily, I have your attention, but if I didn't, I'm just burning it, right? Maybe you're using this time to go on your phone. I don't know. A few of you are. So, yeah, maybe that's important to you, right? I cannot stress enough how much time you need to spend on this stuff. So when I give this talk, when I first did it the first time, I spent a better part of 3 weeks putting this together. I was terrified. My boss asked me to do this for a sales kickoff for a company I was working at. And you're going to talk about storytelling, and the abstract is storytelling. Good luck. And I was like, yeah, technical shit, I'm good to go. But something like this, woo. So you have to step back, you have to think, you have to put effort into this. You have to think of the flow, you have to think of I don't want to stand here and go like this the whole time. I don't want to have to go like this the whole time, right? That's not what we're here for. I'm trying to give you my experiences and some of the stuff I found, stuff I've read over the years, and to get that to land inside your brains, right? Super important. So, that was storytelling, just kind of the baseline stuff that we're looking at. Now let's look at the physiology, because this is huge. I don't care who you are. When you step back and find out these little tricks and tips, this makes everything you do that much better, right? First thing is, you got 5 minutes. That's just a fact. Our attention span is, and I wouldn't even be surprised if new research is getting smaller with the next generation. Anybody got kids? How old were they got a phone? You know what? This is not even a joke, right? And this is an old picture. But, it's just attention spans is 0. My son he's 16 now, but he's been doing it since about 12. When he watches Netflix, he's got headphones on so he's not disturbing us, but he's zapping through the shows. So he's jumping at the parts that he thinks boring. When he watches a movie with us, it's super funny because this is their mind frame. They're like watching the movie, and if it's not catching their attention, like a YouTube little clip, within about 30 seconds, they're not interested. How many movies set the theme of what's going to happen in 30 seconds? That's a 10-minute intro, right? Something is evolving, and now we're going to deal with that the rest of the movie. You got 5 minutes. So what did I do in the first 5 minutes? Did I talk about me? Did I put up a slide saying who I am, where I've been, what I've done, and why I'm so great, and why I'm standing up here? If you didn't read the bio, that's on you. You must have, otherwise you didn't come. What we talked about was storytelling, and telling your tales. I would hope if you do that one-liner that these 3 things would appear in that one-liner. I want this to be the message that you get. You're going to remember these pieces. You may not remember all the details. Somebody might be really impressed by the one thing or the 5-minute thing or the conversation thing, but this is important, right? This is the takeaway. And I did it step by step by step so it lands. That's what we walk through. Anybody here into photography? The principle of thirds, very famous, right? Any image you look at, the human brain works this way. The first thing you do is you look at these points in the middle where the lines cross. That's just how our brain works, right? When you know that, what's that mean? That means if you look again for the rest of your life at a world press photo or whatever why it won, lay these lines on it and watch what happens. It's just like this. And what's even weirder about this, I didn't find this out, so I applied this immediately when I found this out. I have an advantage over anybody else when I do this. So all the slides you've seen and all the stuff you've been looking at, think about it. How many people have done this? I don't even have to say a word. I put it up and I've hit your brain the way it wants to be hit. It's crazy if you do this right. Next thing I found out much later is apparently we read in the Western world top to bottom, left to right. So this is very nice, right? This is a perfect way across the screen for us. Top to bottom, left to right. What about the other side of the world? They read differently. So I'm not saying that your brain is exactly that way, but what if I'm presenting in Asia somewhere where they happen to be the other way around? This might resonate better with that audience. And what's kind of fun to do is so if you get these slides and take a look at them, do this with your own slides, see what works with you. Just stare at them. One of them is going to feel better than the other. Ain't it weird? That is so mind-numbing to me that this is a fact. So why wouldn't you use it? Right? Why would you not do this? I've been doing it to you since we started. You had no chance when you walked into this room. There was no way you were not going to like this presentation. You're laughing, but it's true. I'm cheating, right? I've been cheating the whole time. I honestly spend time on my slides cutting and pasting these lines. I have them in a slide somewhere on my desktop, and I cut and paste these on everything I use. Whether I'm talking to one of my mentees or whether I'm talking to my boss or whether I'm presenting to you, I will never not do this the rest of my life. Because I get that much of a half step more than everybody else when I do this. Every single one, right? It's cheating, really. I should be penalized for that. Anybody heard of Pechakucha? This is fantastic. Have you ever been to one? These are super cool. This is it's sort of like those Ignite talks they're trying to do. It's 20 slides, 20 seconds, you have no control, 6 minutes, 40 seconds, go. And they kind of do cool evenings where you go somewhere in a loungy environment. They might have a DJ, pillows all over the floor, and then they're in every city now. They started in Japan, I think, with these things a long time ago, I think in the 90s. And they've just spiraled all over the world. So if you like search for Pechakucha, it's kind of a weird name, but if you search for that, you'll find them in all the cities you go to. They are so worth a night because I don't care what your job is or what you normally talk about or listen to, you're going to have somebody come in there and talk about something just so random, right? Like a cook talking about his cooking school. I saw a really, really great one of a husband and a wife that talked about the remodeling project. And it's crazy how cool that is because you have to study that. You have to get this right. It's almost like little mini TED Talks. It's very structured how they have to do it and you have no control. So it's a super neat way. And what I'm trying to say here is expose yourself to other stuff. It makes your storytelling better. You can use everything in your life, in your stories at any time, you just don't know when. I don't know if it's such a thing here in the UK, but in small towns in the US, they have barbershops. We see them in the movies with those little red, white, and blue things. The best stories, man, are told by the old guys that hang out at the barbershops, right? That is insane how they just take little things and use certain tempos and certain ways to talk. Watch them. Look at comedians. Every single person I've watched here, I've been watching together with my colleague, and we point out things and we're evaluating and we're looking at them because every single person that I see do something, I can learn something from. It might be good, it might be bad, but I mean, it's something to think about while I'm up here. You should be learning from these things, right? You can tell better stories, and it might just be in the elevator. It might be at the coffee machine. It might be in meetings, or you might actually be going on stage. It's fantastic. So to the good part, and I think we got plenty of time to do this good. So telling your tales. I'm going to walk through a couple of things that I've tell stories on the way, and then I'll try to wrap up with a big one at the end of. I think we got enough time. So we're in the observability space, right? In this storyline here, I was talking about to a group about cloud native observability. And first you ease into the cloud native parts about containers, right? Everybody gets this, right? Imagery and proper location of the words. You can talk about how simple containers are. And then of course it gets all out of scale and it gets really crazy and you got tooling sprawl everywhere and things like that, right? Whoops. Cheating, right? This stuff syncs with people really well because of just really simplistic things, right? Find an image that makes you look at it and you can tell the story. Here I'm talking about everybody gets started with observability. It's an oasis, right? I can see what I'm doing. I understand what's going on. My dashboards are beautiful. Everything's fantastic. And then it turns into this. And this resonates. I had a guy come out of the stands down to me and he goes, it's exactly like that. He goes, we have 200 SREs around the world. We burn out 20 every year. I'm like, burn out? You go, you ruin people. You know what I mean? The burnout isn't he quit and left. That means he's a year useless to everybody else in the world. That's not cool. But again, what we're trying to achieve is order, right? We want complexity and stuff over time, and we want it to grow. We want to be able to manage it and stuff. Most of you should know where this is. Who doesn't know where this is? The American in the room. This is Barcelona from the air. When you walk around in this city, you think it's chaos like all the old European cities. You get up in an airplane and go over it, and you're like, good God, there's order. It's amazing. Same stuff. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but you get the idea? All of this resonates with the brain. I really love this one. In the early days, this was when it was VMs and APM, right? It's very easy to monitor stuff. Not a problem. Our world is just serenity now. But then all of a sudden, very simple stuff comes up on Kubernetes, and guess what? We got 0.5 terabyte of data on one app. One app. And we store it for an average of 13 months. That's what it feels like, you know? Right? Okay, I kind of went through these a little quick because I wanted to tell the story that I ended up telling before we get to this. So I was asked to do a keynote. I was asked to come to a city, and I would be the second keynote, not the first one. Most keynotes, there's only one, right? I was the second one, so I was already a little suspicious about what was going on. And it turns out they were flying in this VP from a service integrator that sponsored this event, and he was going to be coming from APAC, from somewhere in Asia, and he was going to be doing the intro. And the topic that they wanted me to do was, emerging technologies. So what do you think he's going to talk about? It's not even 5 years ago, so it's machine learning, AI, blah, 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 blah. And it's going to be corporate slides with those big logos and crap on it and all this stuff. So I had no illusion what he was going to do. He was going to talk about everything I would want to talk about. So what do I got to do? I got to flip it on its head. So I said, I'm going to talk about you in the crowd, how you are the emerging technology. That was my first thought line. And I'm going to use nothing but women in the slides. So leaving a completely different impression, right, of how you approach this. And I ended up following him up there and talking about how you're constantly learning through time. It doesn't matter what the technologies are. It doesn't matter that this guy was talking about AI and machine learning and stuff. But it does matter that you keep learning as you go through life, right? And so you need to share. And I can ask you guys too, how many of you have had 5 years in IT? Keep your hands up. 10 years? When I go past your thing, take your hand down. 15 years. 20 years? See, look at this. Okay, from the 20 years, you four right here. When was the last time you wrote a blog article? 3 months ago?
Year. Probably 2 years.
See, so it's good, not bad, and what the? Right? I mean, it's just an example of, hey, there's a lot of knowledge right here. 60 years worth of, or 80 years worth of stuff here, right? And we got 1 article, 2 articles, and what the? Right? So I was like, hey, you know, you're all this is going to die. You know, you should be mentoring people. You should be helping people. You should be making people better, blah, blah, blah. And the second row was nothing but marketing ladies from that service integrator. And they came running down after the talk and were like, I'm going to start blogging next week. And oh my gosh. And I couldn't walk. I was late to 2 other talks I had to give because people wouldn't let me through the crowds. They kept talking to me on the way to the thing about how excited they were about the message, which is great because the message landed. And I cheated. You know, I used all these tricks to do it. The other one, last story I'll tell, is again a great example of me just taking a very mundane thing that happened to me. So 2015-16, I got the chance to take my family to the States to live on an island off the coast of North Carolina. I got to check that box. I walked barefoot to the beach from my house at lunchtime to fish. I saw dolphins. It was warm. It was fantastic, right? When you get there and move someplace like that, it wasn't a normal move. I was just going for a year. My kids wanted to ride the yellow bus and have all that fun going to school. I got there with 2 suitcases per person. We rented a house. We get in there. What's one of the first things you're going to go do? You get a haircut. Now, for me, that's not a super exciting event, right? It doesn't take a lot of magic to do that. It's pretty much, zip, 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 and we're done. So I don't want to go to the places like in Europe here where they want 40, 50 bucks to do my haircut, right? I don't need tea, coffee, biscuits, my hair washed. I don't need blow dried. I don't need stuff put back in it. I just want to, cut it down short. Most people in Europe would think, oh, you just go drive around town and look for one of those little red, white, and blue spinny things, and there's your barbershop, and go get in line and figure it out. My buddy was like, at that time, it was kind of a new thing to do the apps for the hair cutter things. And I was asked to do this keynote up in the Nordics, and I was told when I come up on stage that there's going to be a front row like this, exactly like this guy. They're going to sit like this, they're CEOs, and they're not going to laugh at anything, right? You're not going to be able to get them to smile or do nothing. I was like, challenge accepted. I was like, I'm going to definitely try something with that. Problem was, I was given corporate slides, which already suck. They're not like this, right? You can't manage them yourself. Number 2, they had a manager go up there and introduce me, and he stole the first 5 slides in his introduction. So they were going to come around again. So I was like, shit, I'm in the back. I got about a minute and a half while he's doing this. I'm like, okay, whatever slide comes up, I'm picking one word, one image, one something, try to figure out a story out of my head and change it into something else. And the whole theme of the crap was digital transformation. It's a big, stupid story, right? And so I get out there and I saw this slide with Google and Amazon's on it about digital transformation. This is how great you can be. And I looked at it and I was like, he'd already talked about it. I said, I'm going to try to target the guys in the front row. And I said, you don't need to be worried about this. You need to be worried about the barbershop. And here's why, the local barbershop. And so the background story that I told you, I went into my personal story from being in the US and trying to find a barber. And my buddy said, hey, just get this app on the phone. You open it up, you got a pin, you just hit it, and it finds the closest barbershop in this chain. And I was like, wow, it's right across the bridge, and it's got a waiting list of 10 minutes. And it didn't even ask me to fill anything in. I could check in. So it used my phone to check in. I was like, this is amazing. There's a lot of things I don't like about going to the barber, and the waiting is the biggest one, right? So it pings me when it gets to the time for the distance from where I'm at to take me to the barbershop. So I get there on time, so it's my turn. I get there, and it's not fancy like it usually is with like signs and all this stuff. It has a name above it. It has a sandwich board out front. When it's closed, the sandwich board's not there. I go inside. The lady's behind the desk there with a computer, and there's a screen here, and it says, number 1, Eric. She goes, you, Eric? I go, yep, boonk. And it's me. And so you go over there, and if you come a second time, they've already done your haircut once. It's in the system. It rolls out in a little piece of paper. They turn around and hand it to one of the freelance barbers that are back there. You go sit at a station. They go, bzz, 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 and the time it was $14, which is a pretty good deal. That's all I need, zoop, 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 done. They did no advertising anywhere ever, not in newspapers, radio, never saw them online, nothing at the time. They had a social media corner, like one of these things where you could go over here and you could take your thing if you're one of those young girls and you could put it on Instagram or whatever. I didn't do that, but you could. That was really the only advertisements I saw. I was so fascinated by this, I went home and looked it up. That year, they made $1.6 billion doing this. The people that set this up started at a university. There was over 100 in North Carolina. They were all over the US and Canada with 3,400 of them at the time. I was like, you do not need to be worried about, and they don't care about barbershop stuff. All they care about is taking the pain away of the process of going to the barber. And they freelance this or franchise this stuff out. And so I told these old guys in the front, and funny part was about halfway through the story, you could hear them sit up. Like the attention was there, right? Sometimes when you have the audience, I had them. And the arms unfolded, and they started smiling at stuff I was saying and nodding their heads. And I was like, I'm on to something here, right? So you just keep telling the story. I get to the end, and I say, hey, you don't need to be worried about Google. You don't need to be worried about Kodaks and the Amazons. I said, you need to be worried about the next barbershop in your domain. That's the one that's going to come in and start something completely from scratch and take your lunch, right? And afterwards, the compliment I got off of this story was that they said, hey, I didn't touch my phone once during your talk. And I was like, that's the coolest compliment I've ever gotten for a talk, right? That's pretty crazy in those times. So, to wrap this up, give you a chance at questions. What is storytelling? We talked about the physiology of it, and I showed you how to tell a few tales, right? That's the bottom line right there. A few references you guys can do. This is all online. If you go to schabell.org, I've already posted an article with a link to all the slides here, so you can grab it anytime you want. These are all linked. Here's a couple of spins I did on it. So we took some of this information and spun it in different directions. But it's a talk I repeat every once in a while. Usually gets pretty good comments.